Good evening. A Choir welcomes you in this journey of Holy Rosary. Sorry for the delay due to technical problems. Before beginning the Rosary, I request all of you to keep your phones in silent mode. There is a short introduction about how Saint Dominic introduced Rosary to the people around him. Inspired by the Holy Spirit, instructed by the Blessed Virgin, as well as by his own experience, Saint Dominic preached the Rosary for the rest of his life. He preached it by his example as well as by his sermons in cities and in country places, to people of high station and low, before scholars and the uneducated, to Catholics and the heretics. The Rosary, which he said every day, was his preparation for every sermon and his little tryst with Our Lady immediately after preaching. One day he had to preach at Notre Dame in Paris, and it happened to be the feast of Saint John the Evangelist. He was in a little chapel behind the high altar, prayerfully preparing his sermon by saying the Rosary, as he always did, when Our Lady appeared to him and said, "Dominic, even though what you have planned to say may be very good, I am bringing you a much better sermon." Saint Dominic took in his hands the book Our Lady proffered, read the sermon carefully, and when he had understood it and meditated on it, he gave thanks to her. Let us all make sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's start the Rosary with a song. Sorry. May 9. Mary welcoming the shepherds. You must look at the child in the manger. He is our love. Look at him, realizing that the whole thing is a mystery. We need to accept this mystery on faith and use our faith to explore it very deeply. To do this, we must have the humble attitude of a Christian soul. Let's start the Rosary with a song. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell. On the third day he rose again from the dead. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From there he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
As today is Saturday, we will do the joyful mysteries. First joyful mystery, the Annunciation. At times, we become more egocentric and selfish, which harms both ourselves as well as our surroundings. O Mother most holy, pray for us and help us that we may become humble as you were at your time. Mother Mary, please intercede for us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
Gracefully Lady, help us to rely on the promises of the Lord. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
The second joyful mystery, the visitation. In this mystery, Mama, we offer unto you, and please specially to intercede for the communal violence that are going on in this country in the name of pandemic. Mama, give those people who are in power your intercession, your love, your wisdom, and cover them up with your beautiful mantle, that their eyes might not be clouded with their own selfish motives, but they might see the bigger picture of a solidarity with those who are suffering. And this, Mama, we ask you for your intercession. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell.
Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
Graceful Lady, help us to rely on the promises of the Lord. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
The third joyful mystery, the birth of our Lord. Mother of God, we pray for every heart that they may practice humility in daily life. Let our hearts change the focus from earthly attachments like money, riches, and luxury to humbleness and serving others. As we learn from the Nativity, Jesus is the King who was born in the humblest surroundings. In the humblest of surroundings. Though he was a king, but there were no castle, there were no gold, there were no riches. We may also inculcate the virtue of humility in our lives. May intercede for us. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
Now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
O my Jesus,
Forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen.
graceful Lady, help us to rely on the promises of the Lord. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
Fourth joyful mystery, the presentation in the temple. Jesus, though being God, but in human flesh, you still presented yourself before Abba. Help us, brother Jesus, to present our true self before Abba and to build a pure bond of love as that between a father and a child. My mother and my Lord's mother do intercede for this intention. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our
daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen. Graceful Lady, help us to rely on the promises of the Lord. Mary, seat of wisdom,
Pray for us. Fifth joyful mystery, the finding of Jesus in the temple. Mother Mary, intercede for all of us, that we may cling to the love of Abba as Jesus did every time. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed are you amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed are you amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
Now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
Now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners,
Now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit,
as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be,
world without end. Amen. O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell. Lead all souls to heaven, especially those most in need of thy mercy. Amen. Graceful Lady, help us to rely on the promises of the Lord. Mary, seat of wisdom,
pray for us. Hail, Holy Queen, Mother of mercy, hail our life, our sweetness, and our hope.
To thee do we cry, poor banished children of Eve. To thee do we send up our sighs, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. Turn them, O most gracious Advocate, thine eyes of mercy towards us, and after this our exile, show unto us the blessed fruit of thy womb, Jesus. O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Amen.
Let us all kneel for the litany of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Your response will be, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Christ have mercy.
Christ have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy.
Christ hear us.
Christ graciously hear us.
God the Father of heaven,
Have mercy on us.
God the Son Redeemer of the world,
Have mercy on us.
God the Holy Spirit,
Have mercy on us.
Holy Trinity, one God,
Have mercy on us.
Your response will be, pray for us. Holy Mary,
Pray for us.
Holy Mother of God,
Pray for us.
Holy Virgin of Virgins,
Pray for us.
Mother of Christ,
Pray for us.
Mother of Divine Grace,
Pray for us.
Mother most pure,
Pray for us.
Mother most chaste,
Pray for us.
Mother inviolate,
Pray for us.
Mother undefiled,
Pray for us.
Mother most amiable,
Pray for us.
Mother most admirable,
Pray for us.
Mother of good counsel,
Pray for us.
Mother of our Creator,
Pray for us.
Mother of our Savior,
Pray for us.
Mother most prudent,
Pray for us.
Mother most venerable,
Pray for us.
Mother most renowned,
Pray for us.
Mother most powerful,
Pray for us.
Mother Virgin most merciful,
Pray for us.
Virgin most faithful,
Pray for us.
Mirror of justice,
Pray for us.
Seat of wisdom,
Pray for us.
cause of our joy,
Pray for us.
spiritual vessel,
Pray for us.
vessel of honor,
Pray for us.
singular vessel of devotion,
Pray for us.
mystical rose,
Pray for us.
Tower of David,
Pray for us.
Tower of Ivory,
Pray for us.
House of Gold,
Pray for us.
Ark of the Covenant,
Pray for us.
Gate of Heaven,
Pray for us.
Morning Star,
Pray for us.
Health of the sick,
Pray for us.
Refuge of sinners,
Pray for us.
Comforter of the afflicted,
Pray for us.
Help of Christians,
Pray for us.
Queen of angels,
Pray for us.
Queen of patriarchs,
Pray for us.
Queen of prophets,
Pray for us.
Queen of apostles,
Pray for us.
Queen of martyrs,
Pray for us.
Queen of confessors,
Pray for us.
Queen of virgins,
Pray for us.
Queen of all saints,
Pray for us.
Queen conceived without original sin,
Pray for us.
Queen assumed into heaven,
Pray for us.
Queen of the most holy Rosary,
Pray for us.
Queen of peace,
Pray for us.
Queen of family,
Pray for us.
Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world,
Spare us, O Lord.
Your response will be, graciously hear us, O Lord. Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world,
Graciously hear us, O Lord.
Irresponsible, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world,
Have mercy on us,
pray for us, O Holy Mother of God,
that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ.
Let us pray. Grant, we
We
beseech Thee, O
O
Lord God, that we, Thy servants, may enjoy perpetual health of mind and body, and by the glorious intercession of the Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, be delivered from the present sorrow and enjoy eternal happiness through Christ our Lord. Amen.
The Memorare. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession, was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. Let's all say together the special prayer by Pope Francis during this time of pandemic COVID-19. We fly to your protection, O Holy Mother of God, in the present tragic situation when the whole world is prey to suffering and anxiety. We fly to you, Mother of God and our Mother, and seek refuge under your protection. Virgin Mary, turn your merciful eyes towards us amid this coronavirus pandemic. Comfort those who are distraught and mourn their loved ones who have died and at times are buried in a way that grieves them deeply. Be close to those who are concerned for their loved ones, who are sick, and who, in order to prevent the spread of the disease, cannot be close to them. Fill with hope those who are troubled by the uncertainty of the future and the consequences of the economy and employment. Mother of God and Mother of our Mother, pray for us to God, the Father of mercies, that this great suffering may end and that hope and peace may dawn anew. Plead with your divine Son, as you did at Cana, so that the families of the sick and the victims be comforted and their hearts be opened to confidence and trust. Protect those doctors, nurses, health workers, and volunteers who are on the front line of this emergency and are risking their lives to save others. Support their heroic effort and grant them strength, generosity, and continued help. Be close to those who assist the sick night and day, to the priests who in their pastoral concern and fidelity to the gospel are trying to help and support everyone. Blessed Virgin, illumine the minds of men and women engaged in scientific research, that they may find effective solutions to overcome this virus. Support national leaders, and with wisdom, solicitude, and generosity, they may come to the aid of those lacking the basic necessities of life, and may devise social and economic solutions inspired by farsightedness and solidarity. Mary most holy, stir our consciousness so that the enormous funds invested in developing and stockpiling arms will instead be spent on promoting effective research on how to prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. Beloved Mother, help us realize that we are all members of one great family and to recognize the bond that unites us, so that in a spirit of fraternity and solidarity we can help to alleviate
countless situations of poverty and need. Make us strong in faith, persevering in service, constant in prayer. Mary, consolation of the afflicted, embrace all your children in distress and pray that God will stretch out His all-powerful hand and free us from this terrible pandemic, so that life can serenely resume its normal course. To you, who shine on our journey as a sign of salvation and hope, do we entrust ourselves, O clement, O loving, O sweet Virgin Mary. Amen.
Let us all sing a hymn to our mother.
Mother of Jesus and Mother of loneliness, bearing the light of the world. Radiant with glory, the glory of Jesus, conceived by the Spirit of God. In the beginning of time, God's Holy Spirit did shine. Bring on the deep and the darkness of night, bringing the promise of light. Mother of Jesus and Mother of lowliness, bearing the light of the world. Radiant with glory, the glory of Jesus, conceived by the Spirit of God. In the fullness of time, keep the same Spirit sublime. Bring on the womb of the Virgin of grace, called her the chosen of God. Mother of Jesus and Mother of lowliness, bearing the light of the world. Radiant with glory, the glory of Jesus, conceived by the Spirit of God.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Virgin Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Faustina,
Pray for us.
Saint John Paul II,
Pray for us.
Saint Mother Teresa,
Pray for us.
Saint Jose Maria Escriva,
Pray for us.
Saint Dominic.
Pray for us.
Let's make sign of the cross.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us in this Rosary prayer. We hope that you will join us in this Rosary prayer with us till May 31st. After a few minutes, we'll begin the Holy Mass. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Ace Choir welcomes you to this virtual Holy Mass. This Mass was celebrated in the Archdiocese of Toronto by Father Roshan. Before beginning the Mass, I request everyone to keep your phones in silent mode. Thank you. Let's make sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let's rise for entrance hymn. Father God, I wonder how I managed to exist without the knowledge of your parenthood and your loving care. But now I am your child, I am adopted in your family, and I can never be alone. 'Cause Father God, you're there besides me. I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises forevermore. I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises, I will sing your praises forevermore. Father God, I wonder how I managed to exist without the knowledge of your parenthood and your loving care. But now I am your child, I am adopted in your family, and I can never be alone. 'Cause Father God, you're there besides me. I will love you, Father, I will love you, Father, I will love you, Father, forevermore. I will love you, Father, I will love you, Father, I will love you, Father, forevermore.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The
Amen.
grace and peace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all.
And with your spirit.
Dear sisters and brothers, from today's Gospel, we learn that to know Jesus is to know the Father. In the Bible, the word to know a person is not only an intellectual understanding, but it also presupposes a profound experience of the presence of the person in one's life. Do I know Jesus? Do I know the Father? Do my daily lifestyle and works always reveal the Father and the Son to others? These are the questions that we need to reflect this gospel that provides us today. Let us pause and seek God's mercy. You were sent to heal the contrite of heart. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
You came to call sinners. Christ, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
You are seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
Almighty God, have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life.
Amen.
Let us pray. O God, who in the celebration of Easter graciously give to the world the healing of heavenly remedies, show benevolence to your church, that our present observance may benefit us for eternal life. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity Seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us. Lord, have mercy. May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life. Let us pray. O God, who in the celebration of Easter graciously give to the world the healing of heavenly remedies, show benevolence to your church, that our present observance may benefit us for eternal life. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever.
Amen. In today's first reading, we will get to know how the disciples were spreading the word of the Lord to everyone.
First reading. A reading from the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 13, verses 44 to 52. The next Sabbath, almost the whole city gathered to hear the word of the Lord. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy and blaspheming. They contradicted what was spoken by Paul. Then both Paul and Barnabas spoke out boldly, saying, "It was necessary that the word of God should be spoken first to you. Since you reject it and judge yourselves to be unworthy of eternal life, we are now turning to the Gentiles. For so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have set you to be a light for the Gentiles, so that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth." When the Gentiles heard this, they were glad and praised the word of the Lord. And as many as had been destined for eternal life became believers. Thus, the word of the Lord spread throughout the region. But the Jews incited the devout women of high standing and the leading men of the city, and stirred up persecution against Paul and Barnabas, and drove them out of their region. So they shook the dust off their feet in the protest against them, and went to Iconium. And the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All the ends of the earth have seen the saving power of God. All the ends of the earth have seen the saving power of God. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song, for he has done marvelous things. His right hand and his holy arm have won him victory. All the ends of the earth have seen the saving power of God. The Lord has made known his victory. He has revealed his vindication in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his steadfast love and faithfulness to the house of Israel. All the ends of the earth have seen the saving power of God. All the ends of the earth have seen the victory of our God. Make a joyful noise to joyous song and sing praises. All the ends of the earth have seen the saving power of God.
Let's all rise for acclamation.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia. If you stay in my word, you will indeed be my disciples. And you will know the truth, says the Lord. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
In today's Gospel reading, we will hear that Jesus says, "Believe in me, that I am in Father, and the Father is in me."
The Lord be with you.
With your
A
spirit.
reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart from this world and go to the Father. During the supper, he said to his disciples, "If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." Philip said to him, "Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied." Jesus said to him, "Have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father and the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. Very truly, I tell you, the one who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and in fact will do greater works than these, because I am going to the Father. I will do whatever you ask in my name, so that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If in my name you ask me for anything, I will do it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Dear sisters and brothers, John Donne famously once said, "No man is an island." We are all sustained and nurtured by relationships with others, such as our family, our friends, our relatives, and our community. Life is impossible without the interrelationships that we must have. A mother cares for a child in the womb. She nurtures the child through early childhood, and when this wondrous child is grown up, it cleaves to a companion, a husband or wife, for love, compassion, and protection. In our giving and service to others, our life is sustained, while we also bring life to others. Life and love is truly enriched and experienced by the gift of oneself to others. In today's Gospel, Jesus explains that He is one with the Father. These words would have been blasphemous in the eyes of the Jewish authorities. How could a man claim to be at one with God? But this statement is a central claim of the Christian faith. Jesus is God. He is intimately linked with His Father in heaven, as they cannot be separated. The situation is somewhat like this. A pregnant mother intimately united with her unborn child. The child lives in her and she lives defined with the nurturing of that child as a reality of her own existence. We may be unaware of how God acts and reveals Himself in our lives, just as Philip is so demanding to see the Father and yet so unaware that Jesus right in front of him and is precisely who he is searching for. God can be hidden under appearances in our lives. We too can often search for many things, be distracted when we want is just in front of us. The lost spectacles, the love not yet to be realized, the potential of a virtuous act instilling good in another person are right in front of our eyes, yet we can search for a long time before realizing. Jesus is in front of us today, but are we willing to acknowledge Him, worship Him, thank Him, and share our life and love with Him? Jesus is the mediator between God and man. When we ask in His name, He is able to grant us the grace and love. But we must not only ask what He can do for us, but what we can do for Him. We are to put on Christ and perform the same charitable acts that He performed Himself. But this must be done in the action of charity and service, not in the context of power and privilege. Not only does Jesus have union with God, but we can come into this close relationship with God by adopting attitudes of humility and sacrifice in our daily lives. As we receive Jesus and take Him and His message to heart, which is a lifelong journey, we become more and more His presence in the world so much so that to receive us is to receive Jesus. And to receive Jesus is to receive the Father. We need to be very humble and patient about embodying the presence of Jesus in the world, as we have so much false conditioning to be shed. We are in constant need for purification. Each day, we need to invite the Spirit of Jesus to take us over. We could start each day with the following morning offering, and then in the evening, time to go back over the day to see how we have lived our offering and how much more we need to grow into the love of Christ. Amen. With confidence, let us present to God the needs of the church and the world. Loving God, be with your church, with the Holy Father, our bishops, priests, religious, deacons, and with all your faithful people, especially in places where the gift of the Mass is not available. Today, as we come together as a community from many different countries, we ask for your guidance in these difficult times. For this, we pray to the Lord.
Lord, hear our prayer.
For all of those in the daily TV Mass community who have asked to be included in our prayer intentions book, especially those asking for peace in their family, we pray to the Lord.
Lord, hear our prayer.
God our Father, hear our prayers and those of all who cry out to you in need, and gather us all into your kingdom. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord, God of all creation. Thanks to your goodness, this bread we offer. Fruit of the earth, work of our hands. It will become the bread of life. Blessed be God, blessed be God, blessed be God forever. Amen. Blessed be God, blessed be God, blessed be God forever. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord, God of all creation. Thanks to your goodness, this wine we offer. Fruit of the vine, work of our hands. It will become the cup of joy. Blessed be God, blessed be God. Blessed be God forever. Amen. Blessed be God, blessed be God, blessed be God forever. Amen.
Pray, my brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God our Heavenly Father. May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory of His name, for our good and good of all His holy church. Graciously sanctify these gifts, O Lord, we pray, and accepting the oblation of this spiritual sacrifice, make of us an eternal offering to you through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit,
Lift up your hearts.
we lift them up to the Lord.
Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right and just.
It is truly right and just, our duty and our salvation, at all times to acclaim you, O Lord, but in this time above all to laud you yet more gloriously, when Christ our Passover has been sacrificed. Through him the children of light rise to eternal life, and the halls of the heavenly kingdom are thrown open to the faithful. For his death is our ransom from death, and in his rising the life of all has risen. Therefore overcome with the paschal joy, every land, every people exalts in your praise. And even the heavenly powers with the angelic hosts sing together the unending hymn of your glory as they acclaim.
Holy, holy, holy Lord, God of power and might. Heaven and earth of your glory are full. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna.
holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts, we pray, by sending down your Spirit upon them like the dewfall, so that they may become for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time he was betrayed and entered willingly into his passion, he took bread and giving you thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you."
My Lord, my God.
In a similar way, when the supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it, for this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me."
My Lord, my God.
The mystery of faith.
We proclaim your death, O Lord, and profess your resurrection until you come again.
Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation, giving thanks that you have held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity, together with Francis our Pope, Thomas our Bishop, and all the clergy. Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray, that with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, with Blessed Joseph, her spouse, with the blessed apostles and all the saints who have pleased you throughout the ages, we may merit to be co-heirs to eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Through him and with him and in him, O God Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever.
Amen.
At the Saviour's command and formed by the divine teaching, we dare to say,
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil.
Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy, we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you," look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant her peace and unity in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever.
Amen.
The peace of the Lord be with you always.
And with your spirit.
Let us offer one another the sign of peace.
Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, grant us peace.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb. Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed.
Since we cannot receive the Holy Communion now, let us remember our first Holy Communion and best moment when we received the body and blood of Christ. Remembering that, let us partake in this spiritual communion by saying this prayer together. O Immaculate Queen of heaven and earth, Mother of God, and mediator of every grace, I believe that your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, is truly, really, and substantially contained in the most holy sacrament. I love him above all things and long to receive him in my heart, since now I cannot receive him sacramentally. Be so good to place him spiritually in my soul and never permit me to be separated from him. Amen. Decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. The world behind me, the cross before me. No turning back, no turning back. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. Though none go with me, still I will follow. No turning back, no turning back. Oh, take the whole world, but give me Jesus. Oh, take the whole world, but give me Jesus. Oh, take the whole world, but give me Jesus. No turning back, no turning back. I know that Mary will guide my footsteps. I know that Mary will guide my footsteps. I know that Mary will guide my footsteps. No turning back. Let us say, prayer after communion of St. Thomas Aquinas. I thank you, Lord, Almighty Father, everlasting God, for having been pleased, through no merit of mine, but of your great mercy alone, to feed me, a sinner, and your worthy servant, with the precious body and blood of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that this Holy Communion may not be for my judgment and condemnation, but for my pardon and salvation. Let this Holy Communion be to me an armor of faith and a shield of goodwill, a cleansing of all vices and a rooting out of all evil desires. May it increase love and patience, humility and obedience, and all virtues. May it be a firm defense against the evil designs of all my visible and invisible enemies, a perfect quieting of all the desires of soul and body. May this Holy Communion bring about a perfect union with you, the one true God, and at last enable me to reach eternal bliss when you will call me. I pray that you bring me, a sinner, to the indescribable feast where you, with your Son and the Holy Spirit, are to your saints true life, full blessedness, everlasting joy, and perfect happiness through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. Let us say a prayer for priest of Saint Therese of Lisieux. O Jesus, eternal priest, keep your priests within the shelter of your sacred heart, where none may touch them. Keep unstained their anointed hands, which daily touch your sacred body. Keep unsullied their lips, daily purpled with your precious blood. Keep pure and unearthly their hearts, sealed with the sublime mark of the priesthood. Let your holy love surround them and shield them from the world's temptation. Bless their labors with abundant fruit, and may the souls to whom they minister be their joy and consolation here and in heaven, their beautiful and everlasting crown. Amen.
Let us pray. We have partaken of the gifts of this sacred mystery, humbly imploring, O Lord, that what your Son commanded us to do in memory of him may bring us growth in charity through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
The Mass is ended. Let us go to share the love of Christ.
Thanks be to God. Oh, how we love Mary to praise you, honor your name, bless you always. You are the mother of Jesus Christ and mother of humankind. You're the glory of a race, Mother of Jesus and Mother of mine, pray for us that every day we may practice humility and sacrifice, so that we can become as our Father, Abba Father is. Help us to become perfect as our Father. For this we pray, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. We'll say the Memorare together. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. O Queen of Heaven, rejoice now. Alleluia. Rejoice, for he who married though despair. Alleluia. He is risen as he foretold. Alleluia. Pray for us to the Father. Alleluia.
Rejoice and be glad, O Virgin Mary. Alleluia.
For the Lord has truly risen. Alleluia.
Let us pray.
O God, you deign to give joy to the world through the resurrection of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Grant, we beseech you, that through this Mother, the Virgin Mary, we may obtain the joys of everlasting life. Through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Virgin Mary, pray for us. Saint Joseph, pray for us. Saint Faustina, pray for us. Saint Mother Teresa, pray for us. Saint John Paul II, pray for us. Saint Jose Maria Escriva, pray for us. Let's make sign of the cross in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for joining us in this virtual Holy Mass. Have a blessed evening ahead. Stay safe and take precautions. As the month of May is devoted to Mother Mary, a choir has taken the initiative to pray the daily rosary at 5 o'clock in the evening. Do join us. Thank you.